wish I could get a hold of it now. It's such a beautiful, beautiful wine. You may be able to get it in Quebec, but I don't know if you can get it here. But that would be my perfect match for that, because that would lift the, like, it would bring about this wonderful experience. Tell me more of this cheese. Sorry, I'm ranting.
As far as I'm concerned, in terms of bringing the flavour of the beer and cheese together, other than actually trying to coordinate the level of flavour in the cheese, the great thing about the beer, and particularly this beer, is that you have got a nice lively carbonation. And as Jamie mentioned, yes, it worked with like champagne, etc. as well, but the carbonation in the beer, it really helps physically to lift what is basically a very, very creamy cheese. It lifts it off the tongue, off the palate. The other sort of benefit of a beer like this is that you've got a mild level of acidity that also helps cutting through the fat, and also a gentle bitterness as well. And all of that helps cleanse the palate. But what you've actually got is slightly contrasting flavour. It works well as a palate cleanser, but a slightly contrasting flavour because the subtle malts in the beer really come out. So once you've had that cheese in your mouth, you actually get you really pick up the malty character in the beer. It comes out as really biscuity.
It's
almost like contrast there, but I think it's a pleasant one.
But it's almost like you should really be pairing your cheese to your beer, right? Like what you're saying is actually, maybe if you have some Lugtread in the fridge and you want to enjoy one, then maybe you need to think about what kind of cheese to serve.
It's all to do with
right?
Yeah, it's all to do with priorities there.
Yeah, I think. Well, we've not got our next cheese, but has everyone else got their beer and cheese?
Yep.
Right. Well, you can like we'll kick off talking about it.
So it should be the Cape Vessey from Prince Edward County. So we're last cheese was downriver, and now we're going up to Prince Edward County, Lake Ontario. Amazing dairy and cheese making outfit. Built in the last few years. It's I think it's platinum LEED. So if anyone here is into environmental engineering or whatever, you'll know that they've built this cheese factory sort of into the ground, and all the water is recycled, and it's quite an amazing place to check out.
Sorry.
I was about to say, has anybody been there?
No.
Fifth Town.
Fifth Town.
Yeah.
All right.
I should just point out with this one, try eating the inside first without the rind, and then try eating it with the rind, because you get slightly different, both texture and flavour with the cheese, because the rind brings a lot of added complexity to it.
Right, and so if you visit the dairy, they have a cave. Their cave is dug into a hill, and to foster all kinds of interesting mold growths and things. This is a washed rind cheese, so which literally means they treat the outside with, I think, salt water in this case, which gives you that. When you talk about stinky cheese, it's often washed rind cheeses. They're cheeses that have been treated. Sometimes they're washed with wine or cognac or something like that. In this case, it's brine, or beer, yeah. So it's great if you visit, because they actually put a window in so you can look and watch all these amazing molds growing on all these bricks of cheese. And
if you stay there long enough, you might see the molds
well,
growing.
there you go.
I actually,
they'll probably kick you out before you actually do. But
I find it fascinating. You might not.
I was actually lucky enough to go on a cheese making course up there, like cheesemaker for a day, and all these kind of wealthy people from Toronto were paying an awful lot of money to go and do this cheese making course for the day. And I spent half my day with a scrubbing brush, scrubbing mold from cheeses. Like, they were basically getting free labour in their cave. It's weird. Anyway.
Okay, so the beer we've got with the Cape Vessey is Beau's Nightmarzen, in common with the Oktoberfest theme, another German style beer. Märzen style beers, Märzen beers and Oktoberfest beers were traditionally seasonal beers, because you couldn't ferment historically during the summer months because it was too warm. And it's a lager style beer, so you needed a lower temperature. So these are sort of like springtime beers for the spring ceremonies. the beers that are made to be basically easy to drink. So they've not got too much hop bitterness. They've got some really nice rounded malts in there. So in addition to your lager malts, what you've actually got are Munich malt and a bit of Pilsner malt. And what they do is bring a bit more sort of like caramelized nuttiness to the flavour. It's like slightly darker in colour as well. It's like a pale amber colour. You've still got that nice carbonation there, which is great for lifting and cleansing the palate. It doesn't have as much to do as the Lugtread did with that like very, very sticky brie type cheese, because this one is a lot more crumbly in texture. But again, what you've actually got is you have a little bit of the flavour intensities matching, of the flavours mimicking each other there. But then the maltiness of the cheese the maltiness in the beer is really, really picked out by the cheese. So hopefully you find that a good combination.
I think it's interesting. We were tasting the interior of the cheese there, but there's such a difference between the rind and the interior. The interior has kind of fruitiness to it. The exterior has that kind of saltiness coming from the washed rind. This pairing, we actually switched about the pairing. We actually we actually changed a couple of things over the last 2 days, and today it's really working for me. Which is there's a certain, I think it's the nuttiness of the interior, like taking away from the saltiness of the exterior of the rind, but there's a nuttiness that really is echoed in that beer, and it's really kind of turning me on today.
And that's the thing with those Munich malts, the Pilsner malts. They do have that nutty texture, because essentially what happens with these malts is that they go through a bit more of a toasting process. So the end of the malting is a kilning stage, which is basically just heating it. So rather than just drying it out, which is what you do with a pale lager malt, you actually increase the temperature a bit more at the end, which gets a bit more toasting going on. It develops a bit more colour. It's actually caramelisation reactions actually happening to the sugars inside the malt.
I'm actually finding that it works. Over the last 2 days, I've tasted the rind and the interior together with the beer, and I was like, it works. But just the interior with that beer, I think works perfectly. Like it's dead on. The exterior, a little bit less so because of that salty element, which we'll get onto with the next cheese.
Favourite combination so far, guys? Which one do you prefer? First one or second one? We got a bit of both there, haven't we? But this is the great thing about the diversity and difference, because the way that we appreciate flavour, our personal taste and everything, are as different and as individual as we are, as your hair colour and eye colour and everything.
Which we spoke about yesterday, and we did the little tasting.
Yeah.
So the next cheese is a cheddar or cheddar style. There's some controversy about this, about whether you should call anything cheddar if it's not from cheddar in England. But this is not. It's from Quebec. It's a Perron cheddar. Cheddar is not only a noun, it's also a verb. And it has to do with the way that the cheese is made. And if you've ever had cheese curds, well, then you've had cheese curds. And cheddaring means when you take the curds, you break them up, you salt them, and then press them. Yes, to cheddar. Why not get cheddar?
Sounds kind of rude.
Yes. Yeah, I imagine you'll...
Or actually, I got completely cheddared last night. You know?
Yeah.
I think it works really well there as well, doesn't it?
But as a result, you get salt right into the meat, as it were, of the cheese, right in there. And one of the things about this cheese is you might find there's sort of like hard crystals here and there that sometimes you find in, say, Parmesan. What that means is that the cheese has been properly aged. You can't fake that. Some cheeses are faked. Some industrial cheeses are shot up with enzymes to make them extra old or whatever. They're not at all. This is actually, I think this is a 4-year-old cheddar. So, and you get these calcium deposits from the natural aging process. So it's always a good thing if you're having a piece of cheese and you feel that texture, then you know that it's been cared for. It's been made with love.
Well, one thing I learned about cheese from Andrew, who was here yesterday and the day before, was, you know, when you went to your grocery store or whatever, and it says 10-year-old cheddar, 5-year-old cheddar, did you realize it doesn't actually mean that it's that old? It's just that it appears to be that old. So you learned this also.
Yeah.
I'm not making this up. This was like
Yeah.
So they basically inject it with enzymes, and if a panel agrees that it tastes like a 5-year-old cheddar, it can be labeled with 5-year-old cheddar.
What a con.
No, I'm not making like that. Is so bad. I had no idea. It's driving me nuts right now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think that's like scandalous.
You're going to do an article on this on your website, aren't you?
I'm infuriated.
Well, that's why it pays to know the people who make your food and your beer. You look them in the eye.
Yeah. Talking of which, what have we actually got here? Well, we've got one of the special beers here. This is called Mr Hyde, and its subtext is a Rogan beer, which is a sort of a German sort of like amber lager style, with rye PA, like a rye-based pale ale. So it's got a bit of a rye in the grist there, which gives you some added flavour complexity. You get some different, like almost piquant, slightly lifted flavour with the rye. And as a pale ale, typically pale ales have a higher mineral salt level, certainly the British ones, and often people will actually add the mineral salts, calcium salts, calcium chloride, calcium sulfate, etc., to actually get that. Actually add it. It's a process actually called Burtonisation, and almost every brewer in the world Burtonises their beer.
Burtonises. So it's like cheddaring.
And essentially, it comes from the fact that Burton-on-Trent in England was the home of pale ales. They brewed the best pale ales, so much so that that other breweries who had breweries in other parts of the country actually bought land and started brewing in Burton-on-Trent so that they could actually, sort of like create such good ales as the guys in Burton did. And when chemistry finally developed and they understood that what it was the salts in the water that was different in Burton to other places, and that you could actually mine these salts and purify them and then add them, the process of Burtonisation came thing. So they can close their brewery in Burton down, and they go back to brewing in wherever they are, but they can add the Burton salts, so they Burtonise the water. And now it's a process that pretty much every brewer anywhere in the world does.
See, when it comes to winemaking, we don't add water, or we don't add those. That's blown my mind. I didn't realise that you could do that.
Yeah, but I think that the whole point of all that sort of like shooting off at a tangent about Burtonisation was about the calcium crystals in this cheese, and that in a beer like this, you have got a higher level of mineral salt to it. You've also got in this one a higher level of bitterness than we had in the others, which really it intensifies the flavour. So you've got a similar degree of maltiness, but the added complexity of the rye. You've got that higher level of bitterness, and working with the flavour intensity of the cheddar and that saltiness you've got in the cheddar, I think this just makes a great combination. You agree?
Yeah.
Oh no, this is good. There's a question from that man with the beard at the back over there.
Man with the beard at the back?
It never ceases to amaze me when you've got something with grease, how the bitterness, like how high bitterness beer cuts through it. It always blows my mind when I feel that happening.
It's an absolutely brilliant thing. I mean, obviously we've got what we already talked about, the carbonation and the acidity that helps to do that, but bitterness works fantastically. But it also helps the flavour intensity. The other thing that I should actually throw in is that despite the fact that the similarities between beer and cheese in that essentially they're both based on something that starts life as a grass plant. So cheese by definition, it's grass which is then processed by a cow, which is then processed by people, and it's fermented. It's a fermented product. Beer, barley is the seed of a grass plant. It's then combined with the water and the hops, boiled up, and it's then fermented. Hops themselves are an interesting one because hops are very complex in flavour. They really vary from type of hop to type of hop. So you can bring in everything from, sort of like fruity flavours, citrusy flavours, piney-like, sappy, berry-like type flavours with your hops. There's an almost endless diversity. But hops are a great antioxidant, which means that they actually oxidise themselves. And when hops become oxidised and aged, they are said by brewers to smell cheesy.
Yeah.
So you have a real sort of like biochemical links between the flavours of cheese and the flavours in hops. So, sort of like when you get a hoppier beer like this one, you can integrate it with stronger flavoured cheeses, and that's hopefully, sort of like just picking up on that point, despite another long digression.
I had never really thought about the salinity of beer before until this weekend, and I mean, many marvelous things have happened this weekend. But one of the things I've learned something down here, and from Andrew who's here every day.
I think we all learned something. It's been great.
It was. Have any of you thought about salinity or saltiness of beer before? Because I have never, ever. Oh, there's a man at the
Jordan
back.
again?
There's a man with the beer.
We actually had a style beer where we added sea salt.
You added sea salt to the beer? That's just perverse.
Can I just throw in another diversion? And it was what I immediately thought when you made that previous point about the bitterness and what that does. And again, I'm saying this with Jamie in mind here because it'll probably do his head in. It'll hopefully be off home to try this one. But I do lots of beer tastings at events, and one of the things that I try and do with people who aren't necessarily beer drinkers is to give them different experiences. And there's a favourite beer of mine which is called Pure Ubu, and it's named after a crazy dog called Ubu. But it's a lovely classic British bitter, really full flavoured. It's got great malt character. It's got a load of sweetness. It's got quite a strong bitterness, but a nice fruit as well. And it's brilliant with a cheddar like this, for exactly the same reasons as the IPA is. But it's also fantastic with like fudge. And I actually do a thing where you have a sea salt fudge, really matured crumbly fudge, and some cheddar cheese. And you get people and you let them taste the beer, taste the cheese, taste the beer again. Does that go well? Oh yeah, that's great. Right, now, taste the beer again, taste the fudge, taste the beer again. Does that go well? Yeah, that's fantastic. So, now, how can that beer go brilliantly with both that and that? Because those two things are just so different, it's unbelievable. That shows the versatility of beer in terms of food matching. You can do the savoury and you can do the sweet.
At the end of this weekend, I mean, I've been here for 3 days now, and I have to say, and I will concede, actually, I will actually go as far as saying with the pairings that I've had, and this moves into the next cheese, I don't think I'm going to serve wine with my cheese platters anymore.
And it's a big man that can admit that.
That is a huge. I concede. I mean, I like when it comes to this next pairing. So I Andrew, who was presenting yesterday, I had met like over my years in the industry. I'd heard about this guy before. He's a bloody genius, but then I saw their pairings and this last one, I was like, oh, these guys are off their heads. This is never going to work.
All right, okay, well, let's talk about it. Are we getting into it, or?
I wanted to talk about it.
We don't want to give it away. We're bringing it home. This is from Glengarry County. It's the Celtic Blue. It's a blue cheese, which means it's been, I think the term is inoculated, is that right? I mean, they put syringes in with penicillin.
They coat, generally it's actually done with wires. Yeah. So it's like thick copper wires, which are actually coated with a mould, like a penicillin type mould.
The Roquefort
actually run through the cheese.
Mold. So Roquefort.
Yeah.
This is a cow's milk cheese.
It doesn't sound very
we're in
romantic.
dairy country. And so like the other cheeses, you have this wonderful salty, creamy stuff, but you also have this added flavor element from the mold, which is sometimes described as metallic or maybe mineral, which is another sort of term that's used in wine and perhaps beer. So there it is. How do you pair?
Right, well, the beer that we've actually got here is 2 weeks' notice, which is obviously another one of the Beau's specialities for this. There's a nice but sad story to this beer. Unfortunately, one of the Beau's brewing team had, for personal reasons, to leave the brewery, giving 2 weeks' notice. And this is his parting gesture, his parting treat to us all. And I think he paid everyone off big style, because this is a great beer. It's again, there's a twist with this one, because essentially it is it's the grist, and by grist essentially we mean recipe. Brewing jargon, when we say grist we mean recipe. The recipe is like an English porter style, and porter style beers were sort of like massive in the 18th and 19th century. And they were so called because they were the favourite drinks of the London porters, the people who shifted all the goods and everything around the markets and around the stations and that sort of thing. But yeah, dark beers, typically, sort of like 5-6% alcohol. Ale fermentation with sort of like, a very, you got the roasted flavours, but you've got, sort of like some fruit flavours from the ale yeast. This one is slightly different because it's fermented with lager yeast, so there's a bit of a twist to it there. So it makes it a bit more like, sort of like a Schwarzbier, a German dark lager. Whatever the case, it's got the roasted malts, it's got some real flavour complexity there. So again, we're talking about at its most basic level, as the flavour intensity of the beer goes up, you match it with a more intense cheese. But what you've actually got here is some real subtle interplays going on between the beer and the cheese, and you get to the point where actually it's difficult to say where the flavour of the cheese stops and the beer starts, or vice versa. They just really, really intermingle there.
No, I agree with you entirely. I mean, for me, I tasted the cheese, and you've got this wonderful, wonderful persistent finish, and then you have beer. It's like, but the two of them together, there's this like lovely sensual beer. I've been staying at Strange. There's this wonderful sensual dance they do together, which sounds really wanky, but it's actually the way I feel about this whole thing. But the persistence with those two flavors together is just amazing. And I never thought this would work, because I didn't realize this was a much milder cheese. Where would you, if this was a much more astringent, much more salty blue,
like a Roquefort or something?
Yeah, or going into Stilton territory or something like that. Where would you be going beer-wise?
Something like that, I'd be, depending on the strength of it, I'd be looking more towards barley wine.
Barley wine not being a wine, by the way.
Not being wine at all, but I mean, essentially, barley wine was a British rebellion when they first started shipping French wines over to the UK, and the brewers saying, "Why are you drinking that stuff? We can make, if you want a strong drink, we can make a strong drink." So barley wines are typically around 9, 10, 11% alcohol. So essentially, it's the flavour of a normal pale ale, but everything ramped up.
Have Beau's ever made a barley wine?
Our double IPA, when aged for about 6 months, is a lot more like a barley wine than a double IPA. Never branded something.
There's a gentleman over here. Who's the gentleman over here?
It's just before we get too far into to the barley wine side of thing, I just have a comment to make about this last combination of the beer and cheese. Because I've been here throughout the entire Oktoberfest too, so I had my fair share of 2 weeks' notice. And beautiful beer. And my observation of that beer has been having it without any food alongside it, that it's extremely crisp and dry. But having it with this cheese brings out a fabulous sort of gentle sweetness that mellows out the cheese. And it's just so amazing. A beer that you personally know and consider dry.
Yeah, no, I agree with you
entirely.
entirely.
And all of a sudden you get sweetness.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, that's the way that the perfect wine, food, beer, food pairing should work. It should actually. Oh, I'm going to get very sensual right now. No, but you're right. I'm not going to say it.
The thing I like about this is that Jamie's very, very You probably picked it up. He's very emotive and has a really emotive take on things. I'm a scientist, for God's sake. So I have a really sort of like practical, analytical, scientific way of looking at things. So, but the great thing is we come to the same conclusions. And yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is that there's a flavour intensity thing. Then my rules of pairing are, you're always looking for something that cleanses the palate, because otherwise why would you be putting liquid in your mouth? But then it's essentially it's an interplay between complementary flavours and contrasting flavours, and ideally you want a certain amount of both. Yeah. But you've got to have have a foundation of like what's going to work. And picking out on what Anders said there, you know, you do have this contrast in the cheese, which, you know, it's the basic cheese without the blue in it is actually quite soft flavoured. But you really do pick out the sweetness in the beer, and then the roasted characteristics actually just work with those blue veins, and as I say, the flavour just really integrates.
Would you say that the more complex a dish or a cheese, the more complex the beer, you would actually ride along with that?
In most cases, yeah. I mean, there are certain cases where you don't necessarily match things flavour intensity or wise.
Could you give me an example of that?
All things where you actually want something which is quite a radical contrast. Right. So, for instance, I mean, again, one of my classic ones is something like really, really sweet, like something like a syrup sponge or sticky toffee pudding, something like that. It's quite a favoured dessert in the UK, and it's brilliant with a really good pale ale.
Really?
Yeah, because what you actually get is the malts themselves, the malt and the flour, the sponge, the caramelisation anchor it, but the bitterness in the beer just cuts. You've got something which is really, really sweet on one side, and something which has got a powerful assertive bitterness on the other side, and you think, you know, that's just going to clash horribly, but it doesn't. It just cleanses the palate superbly. And if you have something like that, it's quite often that you'll see someone served a dish like that, and they'll get halfway through it, and they just push it away because they can't finish it. It's too much. But beer makes you the glutton, because when you have that palate cleanse, you can finish the lot.
Now, do we have any questions? We have a question from the man with the hat, who's actually, it's not one of the made in China ones.
That's a genuine original hat, yeah.
I'd love to hear from all you guys, but if you were going to have like kind of a fall supper, like a big Sunday supper this time of the year, what would you be pairing with which course? Like if I was going to try and put something together.
Like a beer and a wine?
Feel free.
What are you thinking of making?
Like, okay. Do a beer pairing all the way through supper.
What are you planning for your menu? For an you give us an appetizer, a main course, and a dessert, and we'll pair it for you. Like, you do it. No, you have to give us the
I picked food.
Yeah, of course. We're not doing all the work.
Okay, let's do soup to nuts. Why do we do Thanksgiving?
I was thinking just like, you know, like a rich meal, like roast beef and potatoes for the main, and then a salad course, and then at the end.
What kind of salad? Yeah.
Caesar.
Yeah, you gotta talk to the boss.
Well, no, tell me. We can do it. We can do it like that. We're not doing it for everyone, just for you. But yeah.
So like I don't know, like a arugula salad, and then like roast beef and potatoes.
What kind of vinaigrette on the salad? No. It's important.
I don't even know what that is, so I'll ignore that one. But you certainly want a decent pale ale, and by pale ale I mean the classic description of pale ale was basically anything that wasn't as brown as the last beer, because, you know, pale ale, the term actually came from when they could first indirectly roast the malts, which meant they could actually get, you know, sort of like lighter colours, which ultimately led to producing really pale lager malts. So you want something that's like a deep amber in colour, potentially even something like an old ale, which is matured. Which has a little bit more fruitiness to it. That very much depends what veggies you're going for. So if you were talking about like a lot of roast veg, you know, which actually gives sort of like sweet in the oven and stuff, then an old ale will be great because you have a lot of fruitiness and sweetness there, a bit more so than that. Jamie?
Well, for a roast beef dinner for Thanksgiving, a fall dinner, I would be going for. Let's think. I would be going for I like, and this is taking it out of the local situation, but I'd be going for something from the southwest of France or down in the Rhone Valley, because you can get such good values from there. Like even in the LCBO, when you're forced to buy from the LCBO, you can actually buy. Yeah, no, it would work. But you could actually buy. There's such amazing values from there, like a Vacras or a Gigondas or a. You actually pronounce the S.
Anything ending in ass, basically. Yeah.
That's what I said last night. On that note, I think we have to kind of wrap this guy up.
I think one of my favourite lines is that you think harass is 2 words.
We could keep going with jokes for the rest of the
family
afternoon.
Oktoberfest, and
Why do we always end up with the bum? Yeah, that's. Anyway, thank you very much for being such
we're here around here all the time. So if you have any questions, feel happy to approach us. Thank you very much.
And thank you to our volunteers who have been pouring and giving us a great job.
And thank you to Beau for having us. Yay, Beau!
I would just like to thank these guys for taking their time out to come down to Bakeley Hill and join us on these panels. This is a great one. It's obviously well attended, and I hope you guys had a great time. Now, can you all leave? Because
thank you very much.
Our volunteers need to clear all these tables and get another seminar going in 2 minutes. So.